I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to have you here with us in London for the 2024 London Film Festival. Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to La Cocina. What can people expect going into your movie?
It's a story that takes place in one day in the lives of undocumented workers in a kitchen in New York. So it's a day when everything that can go wrong goes wrong. That's kind of what they can expect.
Tell us about, the genesis of the project. I believe you yourself have worked in a kitchen, so you've had that really hands-on, visceral experience, which you're able to convey on screen. But it's also an adaptation of Arnold Wesker's 1957 play. Talk about, why you wanted to take that play, bring that into the one day. Where did it all begin for you?
So I came across this play, the Arnold Wesker play, The Kitchen, when I was studying drama here in London, actually. And I worked in a restaurant to kind of help pay my way through school. And when I was working there in this place, this big kitchen in Piccadilly Circus, it was like mad work. It's like very stressful and non-stop long hours and also with no breaks, and so it is, it's something that, but at the same time fascinating in the choreography. Kitchens are places full of drama. There's because there's people from everywhere, and at the same time you don't have time to get to know each other deeply because there's always like orders to be. So they're very kind of interesting, contradictory places. And I came across the play at school when I was working there, and it kind of made me understand my working environment better and to see it in a different, more interesting light, making the work days bearable, I guess. So I became obsessed with the play, and I always kept going back to it. I directed it as a play first many years ago in Mexico, and I adapted it from, the original play is set in London. I adapted it to New York, to the migrant experience there. Then I kept thinking about making that into a movie. So the movie now is like an adaptation of my own stage adaptation. So it's a bit removed from Wesker, but I think it retains some of the essential concerns of the play, which are to do with the mass production, the assembly line that is an industrial kitchen, and how it does not leave space for the human soul to flourish, for human emotions. They're places where a productivity is king, is the only rule.
And we've seen some other films and series kind of take us into the space of a kitchen. I was thinking of Boiling Point, which is obviously, the single shot, and of course The Bear. Yours it has its very own tone and feel to it, particularly the way it's shot in black and white, the ratio that you've chosen. But we feel like we're really there alongside, following the waitresses, then following people working in the kitchen. Tell us about those stylistic choices and what you wanted to achieve, how you wanted to bring the audience into the kitchen with these people.
I have to say, when I started working on this project to make it into a film like 12, 13 years ago. And so when we finally, now in the pre-production stage, these movies that you mentioned started coming out, and I was like, oh, fuck. I was about to, to call it quits, but I just couldn't. I had my own take on it. I was so in love with Wesker's world and the themes that he's dealing with. And so I made a point not to see any of those films yet. I still have not seen them. I've heard they're really good. I'll watch them at some point. What I was interested in was this hierarchical society that is formed in a kitchen, that is, as soon as you have a little bit of power over somebody, you will use it. And there's a lot of humiliation involved in like daily life inside a kitchen, and I was very interested in that. And at the same time, the kind of the idea that you can what makes you get through the days is a friendly face. Sometimes from all of this chaos and ugliness, there comes out somebody who will give you a helping hand. It may sound corny, but it's true. That was my experience, definitely working in London in Piccadilly Circus. At some point, somebody turns around and helps you out, and that makes all the difference. And so that's kind of, I think, what I wanted the movie to talk about, and specifically about the migrant experience in United States, which is a very, very particular experience and a very complicated problem that has, so it's about all of these things. I think that's what makes it unique. And the visual choices, the way we approached it, I think, was to shoot it, like the most obvious choice would have been to shoot it like realism, handheld style in color. But that's not the film I wanted to make. I wanted something beyond realism. I wanted, like that Tennessee Williams Streetcar Named Desire. I think Blanche at one point says, I'm sick of realism. I want something more. I want magic. And I kind of wanted a little bit of magic in this film. So I think black and white and the way we shot it, it helps us frame the story as a fable, something that is a little beyond realism. So everything was designed to be a little more expressionistic, to be able to stretch the boundaries of what is real, in accompanying the portrayal of dreams, of Pedro's dreams.
And I think one of the things you do so well is sort of create that feeling, maybe of the claustrophobia of being in this kitchen, and sort of all these, the building of the tension. It kind of feels like a tinderbox, that's about to go all the time. And then, of course, towards the end, without a spoiler, this almighty kind of release, which I guess could see, is it a kind of catharsis? What does the audience go through by feeling that tension and having that moment? And what did you want them to feel?
I think it's precisely that. I think it's a catharsis. It's the character releasing the pressure, right? But obviously, when it's released, it comes out the wrong way. It's destructive, but it's a release nonetheless. Like, things will not be the same after that moment. Then you get to reflect on what the price of that was. But also, hopefully, you get to reflect on what led up to that point, that breaking point, what leads somebody to breaking point, and what could have been done to avoid it. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I want the audience to, the journey that I want them to go on, to really feel trapped inside this kitchen. We designed it like we looked at submarines, a lot of like kind of submarine designs, and we designed this kitchen on this soundstage to be a little underground and to have this marine quality to it. So it does feel like claustrophobic.
And working with the cast, obviously there's a lot of characters there that we get sort of glimpses of, but we're mostly focusing on Julio and Pedro. Yeah. So what was it like working with Rooney Mara and Raul? And maybe, perhaps that sort of final-ish scene, what was it like working with Raul on that? And just, I kind of feel like it must have been quite fun, actually, just like no holds barred.
Yeah. It was. So for this film, we had a long rehearsal process. We brought all the cast down to Mexico City to rehearse for a month, and we put them all in cooking classes. So they all learn to make the dishes that their character makes for real. And then in the afternoons, we would improvise, do like lots of improvs to get the characters to really inhabit, the actors to really inhabit the characters and to blur the lines between actor and character as much as possible. And so when we came to shooting, it was just a very fun process because everyone knew their characters better than I did. And so then it's just a matter, you can throw stuff around, new stuff. There was a lot of improv on camera as well. It was like it's a dance between what is scripted and what is improvised. And working with Rooney and Raul, it was just a really fun experience, almost as a spectator. You just think they're two very different but very intense actors. They're both really intense, but they come from different places. Raul is very visceral, and Rooney is more cerebral. But and they at some point, it's about just working out the scenes and being clear, and then after that, just letting them take it away. I think it's also the director's job to know when to step out. And for me, it was that, like in a lot of the scenes that they have together, there came a point where I didn't have to say very much, or Rooney would say, let me do another take. And I was like, well, but what are you going to do different? And she would say, I don't want to tell you, let me just do it. And she would come up with something completely different that was great and unexpected. And yeah, it was just a privilege, I think, to watch them perform some days,
I was reading, there was a quote from Wesker saying, oh, Shakespeare spoke about, the world being a stage, but, it's the world a kitchen in a way. Yeah. So in your film, I guess it does become a microcosm for all these issues, like you're saying, about the immigrant community that's there in the US, in New York, the tensions that arise, feeling in a state of limbo when you haven't got documented status. Yeah. The thing about languages is something that comes across, both how you capture all these overlapping languages and then the outburst of the Americans saying, speak in English. Yeah. So what did you want people to take away from some of those themes that you're exploring through this setting? I think the fact that, we're living in a completely globalized society, but that doesn't mean that it's integrated, and that there's a lot of work to be done in integration. We talk about integration a lot, but I think it's far from achieved. The fact that we're coexisting, that does not mean that we're getting along. So I think the film kind of just frames that and allows us to see that, we have all these cultures, and sometimes there's a little more understanding. But I think what makes it difficult, and I think that's Wesker's point also, is the pressure, the conditions where we've prioritized productivity over anything else. That is the factor brings us to breaking point, that doesn't, it's pressure, it's outside pressure that makes people nasty towards each other. And I think it's very clever the way he set that up in his play. Like, it's a very clear diagnosis of that, it's outside pressure is what creates a lack of understanding, a lack of empathy, resentment, all these emotions that eventually lead to violence. That's kind of what the film is about as well. And finally, what does it mean to you to have the film here at London Film Festival? It's great because, I studied drama here, and this is where I first became aware of Wesker's play, and so there's a symbolism to me about London. It has a lot of meanings to me, both good and bad. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy to show it here. Because this is where I first started thinking about it. I'm looking forward to hearing what people think about it here. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Thank you. Huge congratulations on the film. Thank you. It's absolutely incredible, and I can't wait for everyone else to see it. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.